Have you ever been in a conversation where you're talking to somebody and suddenly your mind just goes blank and it gets awkward really fast? Well, you probably have at some point in your life. And you probably aren't a bad talker. You probably just don't know a few tips that good talkers use. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. So, what's going on, guys? Today is Friday, April 3rd. My name is Alex, and welcome to the video. Today, we're talking about 3 tips that I use and other good talkers use to make conversations flow and seem natural. I use this in my sales job in the past. I've been in organizations in college that I've used this in, and it seems to do me pretty well and others pretty well. So lock in and let's go. So one of the biggest mistakes I see people make when they're trying to have conversations, people try too hard to be interesting, right? So this is my first tip. Stop trying to be interesting to people. Shift your focus. Take away yourself from the equation real quick, and I want you to get curious about the other person. Instead of thinking, "What can I say next?" Kind of reframe your mindset to, "What can I learn about this person?" So that kind of might look like if you're talking about something, you can ask questions like, "What got you into that?" Like, did you actually enjoy something? Um, like, how did that kind of happen with your life and everything? So get curious about people. Curiosity keeps conversations alive way longer than trying to be impressive because that just kind of loops back to the beginning. Also, people tend to want to talk about themselves usually. So when you do ask about other people and get curious about them, it shows you actually care about them and what they have to say. So my next trick is the thread method. So this is kind of the idea of when somebody talks about something, kind of like expanding upon it. So let's say somebody says they just got back from a trip from Florida. So most people might say, "Oh, nice, that's cool," and then it kind of just fizzles out from there, the conversation. But the thread method dives deeper into it with questions. So instead of saying, "Oh, nice, you just got back from Florida," using the thread method, you can ask questions like, "What were you doing there? Was it a vacation? Or like what was going on? Why were you there? How was it down there?" Just kind of expanding upon what the person was talking about instead of just like saying, "Oh, nice," and kind of reacting to it. This kind of relates back to the first trick too, the get curious method. So get curious, ask questions, and expand on it, what they're talking about. So the next trick I want to talk about that I use is the relate and ask method. So this one's pretty standard, pretty basic. It's where you relate back the topic of conversation to them and then ask a question when they say something about it. So that can look like, let's say, let me give you an example. Somebody says, "I've been going to the gym a lot lately." You might say, "I've been trying to get more consistent, but it's pretty hard, honestly." What kind of got you into the gym and what kind of got you consistently going? So like what I said there with that example, I added a little bit about myself and then I threw it back to them with a question. So you're kind of relating your own emotions and your own thoughts to them, which naturally makes them feel more connected to you, right? Because you're both sharing a piece of information about yourselves. So it makes the conversation flow a lot more naturally with this. I want you also to remember a conversation is something that flows, right? So it's not about trying to keep it perfect. It's about more so keeping the flow going, right? So in life, when you're doing things, there's a certain flow to like what you're doing, right? Like with sports and like martial arts, like martial artists, they have like a flow kind of state that comes. So kind of focus on that flow state and what really comes to mind in the moment and what comes naturally, but also kind of try to use these tips and tricks that I've used because they are really effective in having a good conversation with somebody. And that flow I'm kind of talking about in conversation comes from the things we were talking about today, right? So curiosity, listening, and then building off what was already in the conversation too. So keep these things in mind when you are talking to people and having a conversation. Also, little bonus tip that I probably should have included. Don't try to like rush the conversation, right? Take time to think about what people said and kind of like don't speak too fast because you're gonna look like a spaz, right? But also don't speak too slow or you're gonna look like you're kind of not all there, right? So kind of find a good middle ground where that seems pretty natural and at a good pace. And don't be like rushing yourself to finish lines and get through conversation because then you'll look very not natural. So let's review curiosity method, threads method, relate and asks method, right? So you do these three things, use them in conversation. I promise you, conversations will get way easier. You'll find your flow. And then the more you practice at it, the more natural it will feel. And I should have included this too in the video, but you'll also want to practice, right? I mean, it's kind of given with anything at getting good at something. You got to get reps, right? So practice, practice, practice. But use these three methods, and I promise you, you'll have way better conversations. But anyway, thanks for tuning into my video. Have a great rest of your Friday, and I will see you guys next time. See you guys later.